ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have a true artisan of film, renowned cinematographer, Mr. Daniel C. Pearl. He cut his teeth with the original 1974 Texas Chain Saw Massacre. He has done over 400 music videos, and he was so good they brought him back to do the 2003 remake of Texas Chain Saw Massacre. And Mr. Pearl, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Dan.
Nice to have you here with us, Daniel. Looking forward to talking to you.
You're originally from the Bronx, right?
My folks are from the Bronx. I thought I was born in the Bronx. My mother corrected me on that. I was actually born in Manhattan. I am listed someplace on the internet, probably Wikipedia or something like that, as being born in the Bronx. There also is an incorrect birth date for me as well on the internet. I managed to get it off of IMDb by telling them it was incorrect. When they wanted to know what the correct one was, I told them I didn't recollect what that was.
and Daniel, did you grow up in New York?
No, I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay, there's a good story, and you can tell us whether this is true or not. But I read this off of Wikipedia, so it's just about got to be true. That you met Tobe Hooper. You got your master's degree at the University of Texas, and you met Tobe Hooper in a film lab, and you were giving him some advice on some filters to use, and you made his acquaintance, and he wanted you to shoot this film he was working on, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre, because he thought it was important that a Texan shoot the film. Is that true?
That is virtually 100% true, with the exception we did meet in a lab. I did give him some information. I don't think he recollected that. I don't think he recalled me from that. He had just seen some of my work, and he did when he called me up, said that he did want a Texan to shoot it. I right away became much more Texan sounding than I was. My drawl, I slowed down. In those days, in the early 70s in Texas, they always tell you, you're East Coast, slow down, man, slow down. You talk too fast. Slow down. We can't understand what you're saying. So I immediately went into my slowed down drawl mode for him. I was at that point what they call a transplant Texan. I had married a Texan, so they considered me what they call a transplant. But I was not a straight up Texan. But anyhow, I did advise him on how to shoot something that he was shooting on another project about probably 6 or 8 months prior to Chainsaw. We were shooting fluorescent lights, and I advised him to use a CC30 magenta filter, which is still the tried and true fix for green spiking fluorescent lights. But I don't believe he recollected that encounter. Although people ask me the first time I met him, that's where I first met him.
Oh, cool.
But there was no mention of that. He just said that he reckoned I was the best cinematographer in the state of Texas and wanted me to shoot the picture.
Well, we had Terry McMinn on our show talk about her experiences with the Chainsaw Massacre. Now I'm gonna ask you this question: when you shot this film, and obviously it was pretty much of a no-budget film, and a lot of people in the movie figured the movie will probably never be seen by anybody. I mean, it's the same thing about the Friday the 13th, the first one. But when the film was shot, how many years later has it attracted people to you because of the Chainsaw Massacre? What I mean is, it being in 74, I mean, the VHS era came out 82, 83, so then people started getting the VHS of Chainsaw Massacre, and then it became more popular because people could actually watch it in their homes.
Sure.
When did it actually come to you that, hey, my God, this thing's a cult film?
Almost immediately. It went right into the Museum of Modern Art permanent film collection. Yeah, and at the time that it was released, you'd be in a restaurant, people were talking about it at tables around you. They'd be talking about it on television. It had a lot of buzz. It really was. It was huge. The thing that was interesting for me. I was 23 years old when I photographed the original, and I was when Tobe asked me to do the picture. I played a little bit cool. Yeah, send me. Let me read the script. Let me see if I like it. Right. I had told all my friends when I got my master's degree that I thought I was pretty good at the cinematography thing, and that I would be the youngest man to ever shoot a feature. That I would shoot a feature by the time I was 35 years old. 3 weeks later, after I made that, and all my friends, that's pretty bold shit right there. I said, yeah, well, I think I'm good at this. I think I can pull this off. I will set a record. Well, 3 weeks later, the phone rang, and it was Tobe. My friends happened to be there at the house. As as you guys know, film buffs tend to hang out with each other, but nobody else really cares about what's interesting to us. So, anyhow, I hung up the phone and I said, "What's going on, man? You look like electrified." I said, "I'm 12 years ahead of schedule. I just been asked to shoot a movie."
I love it.
And then I thought, I read it, right, and it was super powerful there in the screenplay. It was really, really strong. I mean, it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was so strong written. And I thought to myself, why the hell would they hire me? I wouldn't hire me if I was in their position. What the hell are they doing? But I wanted the job, obviously. I saw it as an opportunity for myself. So I talked to Tobe. I rang him back after I read the screenplay. I said, I like it, and I thought to myself, we better get this thing going before they come to their senses.
That's smart thinking.
I thought they'd bring in Laszlo Kovacs or Vilmos Zsigmond. They were, do you guys know who they are, Laszlo and Vilmos? Do you know them at all? They're two Hungarian cinematographers. Vilmos went on to do, Close Encounters and, so many great films. Vilmos is one of the greatest of all times. Still working at 83 years old or something like that now. Or maybe 80 or 81. And Laszlo passed away a few years ago. Well, they eventually, when I became a member of the American Society of Cinematographers, I became friends with both Laszlo and Vilmos. In fact, Vilmos opened up a film school a couple of years ago, and he had me teaching a music video class in it. But we used to joke about that Vilmos said, I'd already shot McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I wouldn't take anything like Texas Chain Saw Massacre. But Laszlo obviously would take the job because that was, Laszlo was still doing those kind of films.
Right.
Now, because of my fear that they would hire someone, I'd lose the job. So I said to Tobe, when is this going to start? I figured I got to get it going, And Tobe goes, well, we're making the film for $80,000, and we have 70. Yeah, and it's a guy who's an oil lobbyist, basically. Bill Parsley, who was, we were a bunch of hippies, and this guy was definitely on the other side of the, political line from us. But he had the money; he was the money man. And he said, so as soon as we get the other 10,000, we're going to start. So I hung up the phone, and there are quite a few wealthy people in Texas, and I met a guy in film school who was wealthy but was no longer involved with filmmaking. But occasionally he'd call me up and we'd go to films together. And so I contacted him, and he said, "Yeah, bring me the screenplay." And 3 hours later, he ran back, "I'm in." And so I locked up that final 10,000, which got the picture rolling. He was an excellent foil to our other backer who kept trying to manipulate us. And Tobe knew very well how to use this backer that I'd found. Because my guy was so interested in the project, he wanted in for the whole thing. Right. Anytime the right wing guy tried to tell us something we didn't like, Tobe said, "Well, you want your money back?" So that was quite bolstering for Tobe. And for me, what happened was I got a very minimal salary as a cinematographer, but I was given a percentage, 4% of the film, as for finding 1/8 of the backing. They divided the profits from the films up that way into three companies, and the backing company had 1/3, so I got 1/8 of that 1/3.
Oh wow!
So that was a very fortuitous thing for me. I still get checks today. Not huge, but they're like $1,000 or $2,000. They come out of the blue. You never know, that they're coming. So it's quite a good thing.
I was just going to ask you. I mean, I don't want to pry, but that's always an interest for me. Is people like yourselves that film so early, especially in the 70s, and the budget that you mentioned, that if they actually still get decent dividends because the film is such a cult classic.
I mean, there were some, back in the day, in the heyday, there were some $25,000 years. and it's spotty. It depends. What happens is when the new one's released, that renews the interest in the original, and so it generates a lot of money.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
So I think that after we released the remake, I think we got something like 6,000 or 7,000 around that time from the original. I don't have any piece of the remake. I did a good job, and I got paid a whole lot more money on the remake than I did on the original. But I don't have any participation in it financially. Something I should mention to you, though, at the time, you guys got to realize, 1973 is not like today.
Oh yeah.
There were New York. There were three networks. Fox didn't even exist as a network, right? There was CBS, NBC, and ABC. New York had two. Had a PBS channel, and it had maybe one or two independent channels. And Chicago had an independent channel. That was it. I mean, Austin, Texas, at that time, didn't even have the three networks. LBJ owned, LBJ, the president, he owned the television station there, and I forget which two. That one was two networks, and it flipped back and forth with whatever LBJ wanted us to watch.
Huh.
Right? And so there were not a lot of places to get work, and so the routine, the cinematography was very much a father to son thing at that time, and in fact, when I tried to join the union, the guys even told me, no, we have a pact, we only sign for our sons and our friends' sons, and vice versa. We don't let anybody new into this game. So at that time, in the union system, you were a loader. Basically, you put film in magazines, and you cleaned lenses and brought lenses to the first assistant, the loader and the second, in your 20s. In your 30s, you became a first assistant who was basically a focus puller, a follow focus man. You loaded the camera, cleaned the gate, and follow focus, which is a very, very important position, and actually is a discipline that's unique in its own way. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything else in the cinematography department. It's just this, but some guys are very good at it. In those days, in your 40s, you became an operator, and if you were good at everything else, in your 50s, you're lucky, you became a DP. So here I come in at 23, and I'm a DP.
Wow.
I'll tell you this much, that a lot of the look of that film, right now, that film, as a cinematographer, you're responsible for two things. You're responsible for the lighting, and you're responsible for the lensing. And by the lensing, I mean, there's just the shots themselves, right?
Right.
So it's not only the lens choice, but also the moving, the camera movement and the angles and things like that. So you're setting angles or making moves and choosing lenses and your lighting. Well, I've always felt that composition is something that's kind of intuitive. And I designed a lot of the shots in the original, and a lot of the movement in the original is what makes it so powerful for people. And I designed a lot of those shots myself. There's a whole big thing about, there's one shot in the original shot we made where the girl, where Terry McMinn is sitting on the swing.
Yep.
And after Bill Vale's been the first victim. And this is actually the beginning of the second act, right? And there's quite a change of tone. And she stands up and she walks to the house, and we are behind the swing, and we glide under the swing and follow her up to the house. That's just the shot I made up there on the spot. I realized that I could lay down on the platform dolly that I had and fit under the swing and hold the camera off the front of the dolly, get low enough and tilt up and keep the track out of the shot.
It's a beautiful shot.
Now, the look, this is a very interesting part of it, right? I'm 64 now. I was 23 then, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still shoot Kanye West and Mariah Carey. I haven't become in any way, you never know. Even by looking at me, you would know that I'm 64. I certainly don't think it, I don't act it, and I don't look it, so therefore I'm not in my mind.
Right.
But I do have the experience of somebody who's been a DP for 40 years, and that's a valuable thing. But I'm still learning about lighting. That never ends. Light is an ongoing. You're never going to know everything there is to know about light. A big part of what I'm driving at here is that film, the original, has a cinema verite, documentary kind of feeling to it, right?
Right.
And that has not to do with the move. That has to do with the lighting and the look. And that comes about from a couple of different things. One has to do with how little I knew at age 23. I thought I knew it all. Now I know I didn't, but I thought I knew it all at the time. And the other thing is the technology of that era, right? I was shooting that. Are you guys familiar with ASA or ISO on film speeds?
Not really.
Basically, it's a number. I can't believe we've lost that technology so quickly. It's a number relative to the sensitivity of light of a film stock, and every time you double that number, you double the sensitivity of the film to light. So, for example, today we're shooting principally with fast film stock is 400 ASA, easily pushed to 800 ASA. The ratings on these, you guys still there? Because something I'm like the rating today on the digital cameras that are now popular, the Red, Epic, and the Alexa, is 800 ASA. At the time, in '73, Kodak had the fastest film they made is 100 ASA. If I'm telling you, each time is double the light, double the sensitivity. So you got 100 to 200 is one time, 200 to 400 is the second time, and then double again, so it's 4 times. So the 800 that you have now requires 1/4 the light, right? Now, so you go, that's not so bad. Well, here's the problem. At the time, they go, okay, we couldn't shoot the film in 35 millimeter. One part of it is we couldn't afford the film, and two, Tobe wanted this handheld shooting style, and there were limited cameras in those days. 35 millimeter blimp cameras that didn't make noise while they were shooting them, weighed 160 pounds. Right? You're not putting that on your shoulder, obviously. Right. They had just only about a year, maybe 2 years earlier, invented the Panaflex, which is a 32-pound blimp camera, and the Arri BL, which is around about the same with a lens about 30-some-odd pounds. They just weren't available. There weren't enough in the world for us to rent them on our modest budget. So we were forced to go 16 millimeter, which I think was a wise choice because the shooting style we had, that lightweight camera, was integral to our making the picture. But it meant, and they said to me, okay, but the negative film, this 100 ASA film, is too grainy for 16 millimeter. You have to shoot something that's even finer grained, so that when it blows up, it's not going to be ridiculously grainy when I put it on a 35 millimeter blow-up print and then project it in theaters, which meant I had to go to an ASA 25 film. So that becomes yet again another factor of 4 because you have to double. In fact, I was wrong about when I told you about the 100 ASA to 800 ASA. It's actually 8 times the light because when you go to 200, that's double. The 400 is double again, so it becomes 4 times, and then double again, this becomes 8 times. Well, this puts another factor on it, and basically it comes out to being 16 times the light that I had to shoot with that you would use today. Now, what that means, and now you combine that with, at the time, we didn't have all the big bright lights, the HMI lighting. If you guys are familiar with HMIs, so,
yeah.
They didn't exist in '73. They didn't come out for another 4 or 5 years. So it was only arcs. Of course, I didn't have any arcs. I didn't have that kind of a job going on. So I'm lighting basically with very inefficient tungsten lights with either gel to make them look daylight or, and because of that, I didn't have enough light. I basically told them that they should, on my lens that I have, lens has f-stops, right? And the most wide open one, I said, we should just re-engrave this lens where it says yes. And when I throw light at this thing, when I finally get enough that we shoot, I'll say yes, and we'll always be shooting wide open on the lens because this is my quandary here. I'm having to bring light to this thing, and I don't have a big lighting budget. I don't have a big lighting crew. Until I went to nights, I had nothing bigger than a 2K, a 2,000-watt light, which then you could plug into your wall, right? I eventually, when I went to nights, they gave me 2 5,000-watt lights and 1 10,000-watt light, so 2 5Ks and 1 10K. I thought I was badass. I thought I could burn the fucking city down. I've never seen anything like it. But now, I might use that much light today on a close-up of Mariah Carey. Just on a close shot of her, right? Let alone a night shot of people running through the forest, which is what I was doing in those days with it.
Wow.
So So what I'm driving at is there's a very interesting. You have my intuitive sense of composition and the shots that I was designing with Tobe, right? I think are quite. I wouldn't say they're sophisticated, but they're very effective. They're working at a very high level, and the look of the film is quite the opposite. The look of the film is quite, documentary almost, like cinema verite. Like you smash a light at something and shoot, right?
Right.
So that a lot of the look of that film has to do with the technology of the day, which forced me into certain situations, and my lack of knowledge. Right. That's what contributes to the look. Now, what happened there was, and this is an important thing, when I was asked to shoot the remake, eventually, that's a whole long story which I'll go through for you, but the thing that was important to me, because actually when Tobe, he did a sequel for Canada, right? And I told him I was shooting a remake of Invaders from Mars with Tobe, and he was next going off to shoot that film, and I said, Tobe, you ought to give it to somebody else. You shouldn't do it, because if you don't kill it, then everybody's going to say you got lucky the first time, right? So when I got hired to shoot the remake, right, it was essential to me that I kill this film. Okay, so I show up I've been shooting a beer commercial in the Ukraine, and I come back to Austin, Texas for day one on the remake of Texas Chain Saw Massacre in the summer of 2002. It releases in 03, right?
Right.
It was 02. And we sit down and I go, well, okay, so it's going to be gritty. The two producers, right? They go, it's going to be gritty and grainy like the original, right? And I go, well, guys, you want to shoot 16 millimeter? And they go, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, I can't make 35 millimeter look gritty and grainy like the 16 millimeter of the original. And they go, are you crazy? We're going to tell Michael Bay we're shooting this first, film he's producing, and Michael Bay went on to buy several horror films and produce remakes, right? And this is their new venture, and this is the two producers' first film. They go, are you crazy? We're going to tell Michael Bay we're shooting 16 millimeter? I said, it's not going to be gritty and grainy. And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, we're not going to get that. I said, not to mention, I go, guys, this is a different audience in 2002 than we had that we were shooting for in 1973. I said, because of Michael Bay, because of Marcus Nispel, because of Daniel Pearl, and because of a dozen other people, this audience comes to the theater with a totally different visual aesthetic. This is the MTV audience. These people have cut their teeth on music videos. And we're going to make the MTV version of this film, and it's going to have a look to it, right? Hopefully it's going to be pertinent to the subject matter. I'm not going to suddenly make it a beautiful, glossy beauty shoot,
right.
But it's not going to be gritty and grainy like the original, because for one, I already did that. And Marcus Nispel started laughing. He went through quite a lot of a struggle to get me onto the picture, even though I was shooting everything he was doing at that time. He was doing commercials, and it was just sort of coincidence that they asked him to do the picture. Then he wanted me to shoot the movie. They did not want me to shoot the movie. For one reason, I had shot for Michael Bay some, and he had my daughter, when she was 8 years old, was coming to visit me on the set, and he yelled out, it was Father's Day, and I'd asked him and the producer if my wife could bring my daughter by, because when we wrapped, I was flying to Miami that night, and I wanted to see my daughter on Father's Day, and they said it was all right, but when my wife and daughter came walking into the studio at 5 minutes before lunch, Michael Bay yelled out at the top of his lungs, who the fuck is that kid? Or what the fuck is that kid doing here? And my daughter got a little bit freaked out. Meatloaf, it was a video for Meatloaf. I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that.
Yep.
And Meatloaf was very cool. He disarmed the situation right away. He had his Beauty and the Beast, he had his Beast makeup on, and he went over to my daughter and peeled up one of the prosthetic pieces. Goes, look, I'm not really a monster, and and he totally diffused the thing. But my wife sort of held it against Michael Bay, and there was some, she was handling my booking at times, and so there was a bit of bad blood went on there, which is fine. I'm not going to complain, because our daughter was a very, very important thing to us, and
right.
Totally uncool. It's funny when they called me up they go, we're calling you because, Marcus insists we call you, but we really don't want to hire Daniel Pearl. What we want to do is we want to hire the next Daniel Pearl. And I started laughing. I said, well, you know what? I'm looking for the next Daniel Pearl too. So if you guys find him, let me know because I could use him as well.
Oh, good answer.
What a ridiculous thing to say.
It is.
God Almighty. It just went around and around and around on this thing. At one point, they were going to hire a guy who went on to become quite a good cinematographer, Mitch Amundsen, but at that time he had just come from shooting Disney Care Bears or something like that. And right. And Marcus told me they're going to make me use this guy who shot the Care Bears. And I said, you're not going to shoot fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre with somebody who just did the Care Bears, So anyhow, that credit may not be exactly right, but anyhow, it was something like that. And in the end, I said, no, I've got to do this because Marcus is my friend. He's making this film. Marcus was adamant that I shoot it. He kept because he knew two things. He knew that I attributed my entire success of my career, and by this point now in 2002, not only am I very highly regarded in music video. I mean, I've already at that point won 2 MTV Moon Men, for best cinematography. I've won AICP best cinematography for commercials, for a Motorola commercial that I shot with Marcus. He wanted me to shoot it. He knew that I would give it everything. It would not be just another job to me because of this philosophy that I had that if you remake this picture, you've got to make it as well as you did the first time, or everybody's going to say you got lucky the first time. So Marcus knew that I would take it someplace new because he knew I was a guy I didn't like to knock anybody off. I don't even like to knock myself off, right? I like to go someplace new. So he knew that, and he also, he knew that I had to kill it, that I had to get it great, or else, people say, oh, I got lucky, 30 years earlier or 29 years earlier when we did the original. So that's basically the energy that we went into it with. Now, but to continue with this thing, basically kind of what was going on with those guys they said to me at one point, they go, as we're getting closer to hire me on the job, they go, well, this is, you worked on the original, so if this film is successful, you could get all the press.
Oh my God, you're kidding me.
You're kidding me, exactly, right? That was my reaction. I went, what? I said, what a horrible problem to have. If the first film you produce is successful, you're going to worry about me getting the press? I said, I don't know what to do. I can't erase myself. I don't know what to tell you about that, guys. Hopefully you're going to just be bigger men than that. I said, because what a horrible problem that would be if your film's a huge success. You know what I mean?
My God.
Where's that coming from? What the fuck? Basically, I sort of hung up on him.
I would do more than that. Shit.
Yeah. So, and basically, I didn't have an agent. I had to put an agent in the middle of this thing. This is just too crazy. And at one point, I was telling them the story about the breakdown with Michael Bay and my daughter and my wife, and Brad, one of the producers, goes, "Oh no, you too?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, when my son was 8, I brought him to the Pearl Harbor shoot, and Michael Bay did the same thing, yelled at the top of his lungs, 'What the fuck is that kid doing here?'" And I said, "Yeah, well, that's basically Michael's MO, So anyhow, in the end, somehow, really what it was about was Michael Bay wanted to control Marcus Nispel. They're two of the stronger personalities in Hollywood, right? And the idea was don't give the first-time director his DP. Let it be the company boy who's going to be responsible to Foreman, Fuller, and Bay rather than to Nispel. And so that's basically what they were about. In the end, somehow I wound up on the job. I had to take less money than I thought I should be making at the time, but I couldn't leave Marcus alone on it. And I also felt like, I thought Marcus is a great filmmaker. I figured he's going to make a good Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And for fuck's sake, I could not let my buddy remake my film well without me being involved. So right. I had to, it was just too ironic for it to, not to happen. So I did it. Now, we start shooting the remake, right? And I don't know if I think I mentioned to one of you guys. I play basketball as my hobby. That's what keeps me fit, keeps me moving young, keeps me looking young, keeps me with a good attitude. And I started to play basketball with one of the producers. On the second weekend, right, of photography, we get in the car to we're playing at the University of Texas, in their gym there. And he goes, Daniel, he goes, I don't know what to tell you. We were worried about you. We were very worried. You thought, but you've been so great for us. We thought you'd be Marcus's guy and we wouldn't be able to control him, but you've actually helped us. Every problem we've had with his vision or where he was going, you've been able to sort of bring him around to our side. Like, for example, Marcus wanted the kids to be dirty in the remake, right? He wanted them dirt on their faces. They've been living in his van for 3 or 4 days. They're dirty. It's disgusting, right? The producers are going, they can't be dirty. They got to be fuckable. The girls have to want to fuck the girls in the audience have to want to fuck the guys, and the guys in the audience have to want to fuck the girls. They can't be dirty. They can't be ugly. So Marcus is going, they're going to be dirty. I want them dirty. This is how it's going to be. So eventually we start shooting. We lit Marcus also. He was at the time one of the top commercial directors in the world, right? And but because it was his first feature, everybody felt free to tell him what to do. This is not how directors roll, right? Directors don't like to be told what to do. They didn't become directors because they wanted to be told what to do. They became directors because they wanted to tell everybody else what to do, right? That's a one-way street, right? So he's like, he goes, we're going to shoot in the van. It's 11 pages in the remake, right? 11 pages, and guys, in a feature film, you're shooting somewhere between 3 and 4 pages a day. That's what your ambition is, right? Marcus goes, excuse me, when I quote Marcus, I speak with my German accent because he's German. We're going to shoot 11 pages in one day. We're going to blow their fucking minds, and they leave me the fuck alone, right? That's his plan. So on the Friday before the Monday, we're going to start shooting. We pre-light the van, and we rehearse with the cast in there, right? And they are sweating like crazy in there. So it's 100 degrees in Austin, Texas, and I've got to light the interior of this van close to as bright as the human eye would relate it to the exterior, which film has a lot less of a dynamic range, contrast handling ability than the human eye does. So if you were to expose where the outside, you can see what's outside. Like in the original, if you look at the original, I didn't light the interior. I just exposed for the faces on the interior, and the exterior is blown out. It's almost like they're driving around a white limbo. Tobe and I actually joked about it several days later when we saw the film. We were driving around for days. We just could have done it stopped because you can't even tell what the hell's going on outside. It's so blown out. Of course, I didn't want to do that in a remake. That was one of the things I was going to fix for myself in the remake. So I lit it. A lot of people love the lighting on the interior. And the fact of the matter is that Marcus wanted to do it in one day. And I go, Marcus, I said, if you insist that we put dirt on them, you can see that they're sweating. The makeup's going to keep coming off. He goes, well, I don't want them just looking like cream puffs. I said, how about if they're sweaty? I said, sweaty's sexy. My light will look good in the wet. The wet skin. The wet skin will take the light beautifully. They'll be a bit sweaty. They'll have something going on, and we won't have to replace it. It's not going to slow us down. Every time we cut the camera or on a long take, we're not going to have to cut because sweat ran through the dirt, and the dirt doesn't match what it looked like before.
Right.
So he goes, okay. So the producers, they were like down on their knees bowing to me when around the corner without him seeing it, going, I can't believe you won this battle for us. I'm going, yeah, guys, well, And so anyhow, by the end of the second week, now we're riding to go play basketball, and he goes, Daniel, it's incredible. I said, we were really worried about you. We thought you were going to be Marcus's ally. He goes, we're making a $5 million week. The below the line was $5 million, right? I think the above the line was $9 million, but they paid a lot just for the rights to the remake. He goes, we're making a $5 million picture here. He goes, the studio's freaking out. They said they say it looks like a $40 million picture, and they're worried that we're blowing our whole budget in the first 2 weeks. We're right on schedule because you're doing such a good job. Nobody can believe this is a $5 million picture. It looks like a $40 million picture. I said, well, thank you. It's very nice of you to say. He goes, yeah, but we have one more favor to ask. I go, well, what's that? He goes, well, are you familiar with Harry Knowles? I go, yeah, I am. he goes, well, he goes, they got wind that we're doing this remake. And, this is the remake was the year after Psycho remake, which is a complete disaster, right?
Yes.
Where they tried to remake a thing shot for shot, right? So he goes, everybody, they've been bitching and moaning. There's nothing sacred. Can't fucking Michael Bay leaves Texas Chain Saw Massacre alone. They have to fuck up everything that we've ever appreciated in our entire, lives. And it's all that kind of sour shit going on, right? And then the producer says to me, that's going on for a month before we started it. And for the first 2 weeks, he goes, all of a sudden last night somebody said, hang on, guys. They've hired the original cinematographer. He killed the original. Maybe he's going to bring something new to this. And the whole tone of the message board changed. Everybody's going, oh, that could be cool to bring this guy back. So they tell me the story. I said, yeah, well, that's nice to hear. He goes, yeah, so the favor is we want you to do interviews. I go, oh, okay. I said, we used to worry about me getting all the press, and now they set up a situation where every day before I'd leave, we were shooting nights, right? So I'd have one interview before I'd leave the hotel every day, and then at lunch I'd have another interview. So they came to their senses about that, and they realized that, wait, hang on a second, this is possibly the one thing that the public might think is cool about this project.
Mm-hmm.
So it totally turned around. Now, interestingly, and I got to wrap up off of this, and this is all around the making of the film rather than actually making the film. But every interview would start with, so it's going to be gritty and grainy like the original, right? And I go, no. And they go, what do you mean, no? I go, I already did that. And that was 1973's audience. This is going to be 2003's audience. It's a different audience. We don't take the same visual approach. And everybody go, you sure? I go, this is what I'm doing. So I'm definitely sure. So, it freaked them all out. I mean, even the producers are going like, well, what are we going to tell Michael? I said, look, when they, in the process, before they hired me, right, Marcus kept holding out, right? And they finally go, okay, have Daniel send us a reel. I go, send him a reel? What the fuck? So, okay, here's the reel. First thing up there was at the Vinyls video, I Touched Myself, that Michael Bay directed, that I shot for him. Right? And the next video up was Meatloaf, I'd Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That I shot for Michael Bay. And then the next thing I put on there was the Fugees' Ready or Not video that I shot for Marcus Nispel. And then I gave him a copy of the original Texas Chain Saw Massacre. That was my reel. Right? So
that's so asinine.
Marcus calls me up the next day and he's laughing his ass off. He can hardly talk. He's laughing so hard. I go, what is it, Mike? He goes, that reel? He goes, I know, you basically tell them to go fuck themselves. He goes, but you have no idea how well it worked. He goes, I'm sitting in there, we put the reel up, I'm sitting here with Michael Bay and the vinyl, and he goes, Marcus, he goes, check this out, this is my video, I got my first directing nomination for Best Director for this video, right? Then comes, the Meatloaf video comes on. He goes, Marcus, when Bruckheimer saw this, he called me up and said, you shouldn't be making videos, you should be directing features. This video is what got me into the feature business, right? Then comes the Fugees video, right? And Marcus, he goes, this is why we think we saw this video is what made us think you should be directing feature films. So Marcus goes, so guys, why are we fucking around here? There's like a reoccurring theme here, So what, why this is like not just small shit, this is major shit that's happened to all of our lives. And, so they finally acquiesced. That's how we finally bagged it.
Daniel,
yeah.
You've actually, partly responsible for me being here tonight. I've told this story before, but I'm going to quickly tell it because of your association with the film. Okay. When it come out, it was banned in England for a while.
I know it was banned.
And, and luckily, the ban was lifted for a short while, and I was lucky enough to go along with my sister and her boyfriend at the time to see was much too young, but I managed to get in. And I've said, and I think Gruesome has said as well, shot that, it's been my favourite movie, and that was my introduction to horror, and that's never stopped. But the shot that really got me was hitting the guy over the head and dragging his body and slamming the door. That terrified me at the time. But that was what sold me into horror. But
that the head cheese was actually rotting in place and sticking up, so we had to keep replacing the head cheese because it was actually going bad from the heat and creating offensive odors. Not to mention our bodies as well are creating offensive odors from that heat. But other than that, everybody else will talk about heat more so than cinematographers. It's like something we're not allowed to be. We can't say it's too bright. We can't say it's too hot. Because we're responsible for both of those things.
When it was released and it started getting banned, how did you feel about that after working on it?
When I heard it was banned in the UK, I was so over the moon. I mean, you got to imagine, I'm 24 years old now, right? I've hit a home run. Like I said, people in the restaurants, people are talking about it on television. They're talking about it. The comedians are making jokes. I mean, this becomes, right away, this becomes an iconic film, right? And I'm sitting there going, fuck, man, some people their whole careers never make a film that's this well known. My first time at bat in a feature, I fucking hit a home run. I may never hit this height again. Jesus Christ, I actually started worrying about it. I'm going like, shit, what if I just shot my wad here on the first time and never, it never happens for me again.
And do you ever sit and watch the film now?
I do occasionally watch it. It's funny, my present wife, I've been with for 34 years, and she's also the mother of our daughter, who's 27 years old. They had never watched it. Our daughter was 16 when the remake was released, and she had to go to the premiere, had to meet the movie stars, had to go. But she still, up until I think 2 years ago, had not watched the original, and she was telling me she was throwing a Halloween party. And I said, well, I gave you a DVD original. You better fucking put it on your party. So she did, and so she saw it. But yeah, I have watched it in glimpses because occasionally now I'll go. People ask me to come and speak about things, and so I often talk about that shot that we spoke about under the swing, and I'll show it, and then I'll show Marcus's. Since that was a signature shot, Marcus designed, and I helped him execute. He designed the shot. I came up with the execution of it. What was supposedly a similar signature shot for the remake. The shot. You guys are all familiar with the remake, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. The shot where the girl, shoots the hitchhiker that they pick up. They had the stray. I guess they picked up. She shoots herself from the front of the car, back past the screaming passengers, through her head, out to a big open field. That was basically a shot that Marcus designed in order to give the remake a signature shot as well.
That's beautiful.
So I do frequently talk to people, if they're film students or if I'm teaching a class myself, or the American Society of Cinematographers, which I'm a member of, will ask me to come in and speak to the students. They'll bring in students from different universities, and I'll have 3 or 4 of us come in. And so one of the things I talk about is that because I'm the only guy in the history of cinema who's actually remade the same film in the same position, right? So it's a unique conversation. So I do sometimes do a thing where I'll show the lead up to Bill Vale getting killed in the original, up to the dolly shot that takes her up to the house, and then I'll show the intended signature shot from the remake, and then talk about both of those things. So, but to actually sit down and watch the whole film through, I've not done that lately. No.
Have you watched this year's 3D version, and what did you think of it? If you've not seen it,
I do have it in my Netflix queue. It didn't do very much business. I like to say that the only 2 Texas Chainsaw Massacres that ever made money was, I shot both of them, the original and the 2003 the 2003 remake was a top grossing film the week that it was released. Michael Bay, Marcus Nispel and I, his agent got a limo and we went around to different theaters in Los Angeles, which is quite quite fun thing to do, right? You go to different neighborhoods, you know, and some neighborhood people yelling, "Don't go in there! Don't go in that! Don't go in that house!" People are talking to the screen. Other people are much quieter, you know. But it was quite fun, and we wound up for the midnight screening at Universal Studios here, right? And as we came in the back door, Michael Bay was standing there. He gave us both massive big hugs and said, "Guys, as of right now, I'm in the black." So he was in the black at midnight on day one. On that
shit.
Yeah. So he was extremely happy. You know, he already had the receipts. He already knew what it had grossed on Friday night. I forget what it did exactly. I think $35 million, something like that. But for a picture that cost $5 million to make below the line, that was incredible opening weekend. And you know, it had some legs as well. It went for a while. You know, the original was released by Bryanston. Two Italian guys who eventually were deported back to Italy, and they were distributing Deep Throat, Texas Chain Saw Massacre, Warhol's Dracula, and Warhol's Frankenstein, and I forget if it was Legend of Boggy Creek or Night of the Living Dead. One of the two of those that they also had. So they had like 5 of the world's top independent features in a time when there weren't many independent features, and they somehow went bankrupt during that time. So there's a lot of dodgy business going on with those guys. So there's no telling what we really know about the gross of the original when it was released. You know, first of all, they gave us $250,000. We made the picture for $80,000, right? I'm going to tell you another behind-the-scenes story that you guys will like. My ex-wife and I, we were married at that time. Because you know, it's hard to make a living 100% as a cinematographer in Austin, Texas. So she and I also had a bit of an editing business where we prepared negatives for answer printing, which makes A and B rolls. You put in a sync block 2 rolls of film, and when there's a picture on roll A, there's not a picture on roll B. It's black, opaque black. And then when you make the cut, it switches over, and basically you run both of those through the printer. And that's how you make your edited piece with no splices in the final print. You run through a printer and you process it. Well, we would do this for people for commercials because this is back. You have to realize FedEx didn't exist in this time, and videotape didn't exist at this time, right?
Right.
So if you had a commercial that you needed to get out quickly, you had to get the A and B rolls made for the lab, and then you would send somebody to Los Angeles to oversee the work at the lab, and then make 50 prints and bring it back to Texas. Well, this was a sideline that we would do. We would do overnight. People would get their edit approved 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. They'd give us the film, and by the morning, for the flight to get on a plane to Los Angeles, we'd have the film edited into its printing rolls, the A and B rolls. But we charged $1 a shot. Well, I don't know what it was, maybe it was a $500 or $600 minimum or something like that. Maybe $300 minimum, something like that. I don't know what it was. But the two of us would stay up all night long and do this. Well, everybody that was in the editorial department knew that we did this. And the process we'd empty our living room, we'd put sheets up 4 feet up the wall, and the sheets would drape onto the floor. And I'd sit there and I'd call out the edge numbers of each shot. My ex-wife would write down those numbers. Then we'd go back through and we'd put them in order, and I'd pull the shots, and she would hang the shots up on the wall, and then we'd get them all pulled, hanging on the wall, and then we'd edit them back together. So they go, "Oh, we know how to do that." I would sit on one side of the table and edit the heads, and she would sit on the other side of the table and edit the tails of the preceding shot while we're together, splicing it back and forth. Is this making sense to you guys? You're following it up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Definitely.
So they go, "Well, we're not paying Pearls to do that. We'll do that ourselves," right? Well, what they didn't know was that the tail of the shot, the splicer had to be used backwards, right? And so they had the splicer facing themselves, but both splicers needed to face my side of the table. They didn't know that. So consequently, they scraped away. Tobe edited the picture for 6 months, putting 1 frame in, 1 frame out, 1 frame in, 1 frame out. Drove several editors completely crazy. Then they mixed off the work print, which is the editing print, not the finished print. They did the mix at Taddeo, right? They then did the negative conforming themselves, made the A and B rolls, and when they projected the film, there was a half frame. Every last frame of every single shot was half black. The bottom half of every single shot was half black. So they couldn't they'd scraped the image away in order to make the edit, so they had to shorten, every single shot had to be shortened by one frame off the tail. So what's interesting is the masterpiece of horror is actually every single shot is one frame shorter than it's meant to be. This is a complete error. And the additional thing is, they now, because they'd already sold the film to Bryanston, they had to deliver it by such and such a date. Bryanston was already buying theater dates, and because the film was, every single shot was one frame shorter, they had to redo the sound, because in 3 cuts it'd be visibly out of sync. So they had to remix it, and that had to be done on overtime, because they had an appointment which they used. Now it's several weeks later, a month later, they have to do an overtime, and that costs another $48,000. So it costs more than half of what we spent on the film just to cover up for this mistake, right, that they made, right? And so that brought the budget up to $128,000, excuse me. But the reason I started telling you this whole story was Bryanston gave us $250,000. So those of us who had profit participation, we got checks before the movie even went to the theaters. We had money. So I'm totally mind blown by this, right? And myself and Toby, the two of us, we took it as, this is a great credit. We run with this and go where we can. A lot of the other people in my mind, I thought they were smaller thinking. They all thought they were going to get rich off of this movie, right? I knew I was making money off the movie, but I didn't see it as my end game. This is my end, not my end game. This is my beginning. This is my entry into filmmaking. To finish to answer your question, although it was banned in England, I was so high on riding the wave of its success that, it didn't, at that time, it didn't seem to me like, oh, well, it's banned in England, but everybody, it's working for me just fine. And a lot of the other people, they wanted to start ramping up these lawsuits, and everybody told us, look, you don't want to have a lawsuit with these 2 Italian guys, because you're going to wind up in the river or the ocean if you fuck with these guys, and so don't do that. And I'm saying, look, stop wasting your time. That's the past, guys. Look forward. Use the picture for what it can do for you, not try and get as much as you can out of the picture, And some people listened, but mostly they didn't. And so that's, in my mind, that's really a big difference on who went where off that movie. Who took it to use it as a calling card, and who took it, and turned into sour grapes over it, that they didn't make as much money as they thought they should have for success.
Yeah, I like John, Daniel, I'm a big Texas Chain Saw Massacre fan, and so I've read a lot about it, and I had read that by the time the remake had come around, you were very well established in your career, and they kind of had to lure you back, but that's not the case, and I'm glad to hear that, because it's good that you're so proud of what you did, because I think that's why Texas Chain Saw Massacre is such a classic, because it's more than an exploitation or a horror film. It's so well shot, it's so well made, but it still has the grimy indie quality to it, but you can tell that there's talent there. And hearing you go on about you took a lot of pride in the original, you took a lot of pride in the remake, I'm very glad to hear that.
I think that, I tell everybody that they should watch them both. Although it's the same title and it's the same story, I think if you've watched one does not mean you can't watch the other. If you're a fan of the genre, you're going to love both of them.
Exactly.
Are you a horror guy? Do you like horror movies? And when
actually, actually, it's very funny. I'm not that. I do like horror films. I do watch them, but I don't run out to see every one. I just happen to be very good at shooting them. It's really look. First of all, they want stylized. They want dramatic lighting. They want darkness. They want edginess. They want you to create a mood, create an emotion, make people uncomfortable. They want, they want great photography. You go to a comedy and the director will tell you, light the fucking jokes. Anybody who goes darker in this movie again, you're fired. Light the fucking jokes, right? But in a horror film, it's all about creating that mood. So I love shooting them. I'm not a huge fan. It's funny because people when they talk to me about it, I know I was talking about the reference thing with Requiem. The Brothers South, we were in Vancouver, and they had to leave before we were shooting while we were still in prep. They had to leave for the weekend. And I said, well, listen, guys, because they mentioned so many films. They said, what do you guys want me to watch while you're gone? I said, watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake over and over again. So basically, that's been the case. When I hired for The Apparition, Friday the 13th was the same director and same producers as the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I think that there's a validity to it, and basically, a lot of people feel like that I changed the tone of horror film, photography with the original, and that they feel like I did it again with the remake. With the remake, that I took it into a much more sophisticated, higher level of style.
Absolutely. It's the best remake, bar none. It really is the best horror remake out there. I
think so too. I think that's not only my work, but Marcus's work as well. And the writing, the script is quite good. One other story I want to tell you about the remake is that I was the only person who was back on the remake. Right, no one else got hired. Right, I was the only person who was back, and I thought this is going. If I'm sitting there every minute going, on the original we did this, there's just going to be fucking bloody boring. I'm not gonna mention it. I'm just not gonna talk about it. Now Jessica Biel, she was really cool, right? She with her assistant, every weekend, either on a Saturday or Sunday, they'd call me up, come on, we go out, we get loaded and go to a barbecue place, and she would have me tell stories about the original. She just loved to hear the stories about making the original.
That's cool.
She was all into that. She's a very cool person. I mean, she is beautiful inside and out. When the first time we shot her shots of her in the van was something we did early, they called me up from Technicolor, it was the lab, and they said, listen, because, we put 1,000-foot loads up on the film cameras, right? So they run 11 minutes at a time. They could run for 11 minutes. They said, from now on when you shoot Jessica, don't turn the camera off, just let it roll out. We're quite happy to look at her all day long. And I was as well. She's great. I mean, it's an interesting thing between a cinematographer and a leading lady, right? It's not to say that it has to be romantic, but it kind of has to be flirtatious, the relationship, right? There's nothing romantic between her and I, but I did like her a lot, and she did like me, and that helps, in that situation.
Sure.
But the other thing I wanted to say to you was about this thing where I'm not going to be telling people that, the way we did the original was this, and I'm going to be talking about it. Everybody's going to hate me if I do that. Well, it comes time to hang the guy on the meat hook in the remake, right? And they're going to show, all right, here's the rehearsal, right? They got a winch, and the winch has got some ridiculous ratio. It could probably, lift up several tons. Anyhow, they press the button, and he's going up. It takes like 30 seconds to get him up to the altitude where he's going to be put onto the hook. And then, they lower him down, and I go, guys, this is not going to work. That's not going to freak some people out. It's the planting of the hook in the back, the violence of that, the force that's done with, not this, slowly lifting the thing up like we're opening up, a survival, shelter or something like that. Both giant doors opening, something very slow. So I told them how we did the original. I said, guys, we're going to take the hook, and we're going to show them coming towards the hook with the hook in the foreground, and then we're going to take him, and we make this harness that goes on his legs. A strap comes up his back, and there's an O-ring on the strap. We then turn the hook around the other way. The Leatherface character will hold him very high. He's already threaded onto the hook, but the hook is facing away from his back. And when we bring him down and the O-ring settles in the bottom of that hook, it will jerk his whole body, And so basically we did it that way. But that was really the only time that I mentioned anything about the original. It probably also had something to do with them, their concern about me, saying, oh, it's going to become all about you, blah, blah, blah.
I love that. I love that. It turns out to be all about you, because they needed you.
I know. It's like that was. There's three different conversations. Another one was also there was another ridiculous one too, where they go, "Well, Michael Bay, he wants to make sure you're going to be, this Austin, that you're going to be, you're not going to be too hard on this Austin crew, right?" Because I have a bit of a reputation of being, a guy. Look, I'm passionate about filmmaking, right? That's all. When we're on the set, that's all I give a fuck about. Nothing else is important to me except for the shots and, the good of the film and me, exercising my craft. That's all I care about. And I don't give a shit about people on their phones. I don't give a shit about people, whatever else it is. And if I find somebody that's fucking off, I'll get on them, right? So Michael Bay wants to tell me how I got to behave. And, Michael Bay, I don't know if you guys know, he's like, he is famous as the hothead of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And Marcus Nispel is like second in, ranked in that. So we were having a lot of arguments about money. And I said, you know what? When he said, "Oh yeah, Michael's going to want to tell you how you got to behave with the crew." And I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "Look, you guys don't even have to pay me." I said, "If I'm allowed to record and sell, Michael Bay instructs Daniel Pearl on how to behave on a Marcus Nispel set." I said, that I could sell that and make money. I make more money than shooting your movie, selling that to people. Marcus, when he heard about it, he goes, "Are they fucking crazy?" He goes, "I want everybody to be scared shitless of you. I want that cast to be fucking freaked out of you. You're gonna set the tone in this movie. You are the horror. You're gonna bring the horror to this film."
I love it.
He did it himself. Well, and I gotta say, on the remake, is that ensemble, those 5 kids, I call them kids because they were in their 20s, they were adults. But, Jessica and Jonathan and Eric and that and Mike and God, I can't remember the other girl's name. Anyhow, that was the greatest ensemble I ever worked with.
Really?
Really, really great ensemble. Marcus is a pretty nutty guy, and ever since then, I've done 3 more movies with Marcus, and he's done a couple of pictures since without me. We fell apart after Friday the 13th. He's always lost his cast, but that cast, they just sort of they just turned to each other, and they just thought his routine was quite humorous, and they sort of got on with it. But in the other movies that we made since, he's had a real problem with, he alienated. He starts to, actors, they want to talk about the performance and their character. And for Marcus, he's already thought all this out in his mind, so he just wants them to do what he wants. So he treats them a bit too much like furniture, because he already knows what he wants them to do, and they want to discuss it. And he's always in a rush too. He always wants to shoot quickly, and so he doesn't want to take the time. And so, but that cast, they were brilliant. I work with any one of them again. I actually had the pleasure to shoot a short with Jonathan Tucker not that long ago. It was still great to work with.
Yeah, I do want to say, Daniel Pearl is in my cool book now. You have been one of the best guests we have ever had.
Well, thank you.
The fact that they brought you back to shoot the remake kind of intrigued me.
What you got is you got a bunch of people who just had. We were young. I was 23, right? Tobe was 25, I think. Larry Carroll, our editor, he's quite good, and Gunnar. But we were just. It was strange because I think that we probably had. I went to film school and I had my master's degree, but those guys. Even at the time, I didn't think I was learning anything from them. They were a bunch of people with bad attitudes that couldn't make it in the film business. My inspiration while I was in graduate school came from a still photographer named Russell Lee. He was, during the Depression working with Dorothea Lange and Minor White. This was a man that when I met him, he was in his late 60s. He just wanted to share his knowledge. He had a bunch of art students. He was teaching photography in the art school, and they all thought everything was one image, and they were very sort of rigid. And I was this guy that would come back with 5 or 6 views like I was shooting a sequence, right? And I'd never met anybody like him that was just sort of had done it, was very successful, and now wanted to share, right? Because all my film teachers I thought were just uptight because they couldn't make it, and he'd never met anybody that was like me, and the two of us got on like a house of fire. And that guy really was throughout my education, he was the most inspirational man to me. the very first photograph I took for him was a house, a 2-minute exposure at night of one of these gingerbread houses in Austin, Texas, that I've sold probably over 100 prints of. I used to sell them when I was a student for $50 a piece, and most recently the American Society of Cinematographers sold a couple of them for $1,000 a piece to raise money. That's the story there.
It's been a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you.
Likewise. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Take care. We'll see you.